Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Chapter 26. Can you tell me about such a tool? Soul skill is an auxiliary tool. Soul. After realizing what happened to him before, Wang Chang's heart collapsed. Although Wang Chang is a repeat student of T Online Middle School, he is only 19 years old. Although young people want to experience everything, those with a normal mind would not be interested in things like lying in a coffin. The excitement of this thing is already a bit over the top. Therefore, the psychological shadow area in Wang Chang's heart can be imagined for what he has experienced decades or even hundreds of years in advance. If someone can measure it, they can definitely get an infinite data. After comforting Wang Chang, Fu Wenbo continued, "This kid's artifact soul skill is a bit wicked, and he can silently generate a strong attraction that makes people involuntarily want to lie down in that coffin." At the same time, Fu Wenbo said to Xu Hongwen, "Although Wang Chang is a veteran of the review class, and his level is not low, Wang Chang's artifact soul skills only create an environment. However, if Chu Huan uses the tool soul skill because of the stimulation of the environment, it will be able to produce effects. Needless to say, the target object of the tool soul skill will only be Wang Chang. Now you know why I'm so nervous, right? This kid's artifact soul skill is not an ordinary evil sect." After speaking, Fu Wenbo still looked happy. "If I hadn't personally learned about Chu Huan's item soul skills yesterday, I'm afraid that today would have been a big deal due to Xu Hongwen's mess." Opposite Fu Wenbo, after quietly listening to what Fu Wenbo said, Xu Hongwen's expression was full of strangeness at the moment. Looking at Wang Chang, after listening to Fu Wenbo's explanation, Wang Chang turned his head a little blankly and looked at Chu Huan. His expression was full of terror and fear. Facing Wang Chang's gaze, Chu Huan showed a friendly smile and spread his hands. "Well, I don't know that you guys did all this before, otherwise I'll just stand by and watch the show." Wang Chang twitched the corners of his mouth and said, "Then I'm sorry, my brother, you." Chu Huan smiled and said, "Small things, don't take them too seriously." Looking at the smiling Chu Huan, Wang Chang said, "MMP," in his heart, hesitating whether to say it. Hearing this, Wang Chang pondered for a few seconds and then silently turned his head to look at Xu Hongwen, who was on the side. "Mr. Xu, what kind of hatred, as for letting you pit me like this?" Those resentful eyes seemed to be complaining to Xu Hongwen. Being stared at by Wang Chang like this, Xu Hongwen also gave a wry smile. "What are you thinking? How did I know in advance that this kid's artifact soul skills would be so evil?" Then, as if thinking of something, Xu Hongwen continued, "And this kid's profile is written about the awakened auxiliary device soul, so I didn't care at first." When these words came out, Wang Chang, who was still alone and sad, exploded. "What? He is an auxiliary device soul? What, are you kidding?" Wang Chang himself is an auxiliary type of tool soul, so he has a better understanding of auxiliary type awakened people. In Wang Chang's opinion, the auxiliary equipment soul skills should not be like his own, which can create some environment, or help to get some debuffs to apply eye drops to the enemy or drag them down. But what about Chu Huan? The tool soul skill directly summons a coffin, which can not only cause damage to the enemy, but also can actively lie down in the coffin and turn the enemy into a puppet that can be manipulated. Simply strong and weird. Can you tell me about such a tool soul skill as an auxiliary tool soul? What about funny? Bully me for reading less." In Wang Chang's astonishment, Fu Wenbo sighed and said, "This is also true. When I learned about this kid's soul skill yesterday, I was so shocked that I didn't recover for a long time." While speaking, Fu Wenbo couldn't help but glance at Chu Huan with a deep doubt in his eyes. Such a good auxiliary tool soul, how did it become such a weird thing when it came to Chu Huan? However, after confirming Wang Chang's safety, Fu Wenbo felt relieved at this moment. The basket is called a basket when it is pierced. Now that Wang Chang is in good shape, and his life is worry-free, it is naturally not a slap in the face. Therefore, looking at Wang Yang with a dazed and shocked face in front of him, he relaxed and asked, "By the way, what did you feel like lying in that coffin before?" When Fu Wenbo took Chu Huan to test this soul skill yesterday, he was looking for a biting wolf. However, neither Fu Wenbo nor Chu Huan are summoning awakeners, so they cannot communicate with the beasts, and naturally they cannot understand the feelings of the parties involved. But today, by accident, Wang Chang was lying in the coffin that Chu Huan had brought out for a while. In this regard, Fu Wenbo is naturally a little curious. Hearing Fu Wenbo's question, Chu Huan, who seemed a little bored at first, suddenly regained his spirits, and then looked at Wang Cheng with burning eyes, full of curiosity on his face. At this moment, Wang Cheng really wanted to shout and question the people in front of him. Is it really appropriate for you to sprinkle salt in your wounds like this? Chapter 27. You know, it was Wang Cheng who just lay in the coffin and was injured. But now, Fu Wenbo even asked Wang Cheng how he felt. It's like when one person stabs you and another person asks you what kind of pain the wound is. Don't bring such bullying. Are you still talking about the morality of the lecturer? Facing Fu Wenbo's mood at the moment, Wang Cheng's eyes were filled with grievances. Looking at Wang Cheng's expression at the moment, Fu Wenbo had a question mark on his face. Why are you looking at me like this? Say it. Hearing this, Wang Cheng said with a wry smile, I don't know. When I opened my eyes and regained consciousness, I already saw you, Teacher Fu. Chu Huan said, you can recall your memories carefully, and you can talk about how you felt during the process. Chu Huan felt that Wang Cheng had been lying in the coffin for a while, so he had to feel a little different. Facing Fu Wenbo and Chu Huan's expectant and encouraging eyes, Wang Cheng smiled bitterly in his heart, and then tried his best to remember. As Chu Huan thought, although Wang Cheng was directly cut off before. But sometimes, the feeling is there. Just like when you are in a dream, even if you wake up from the dream, but because of the experience of the dream, even if you can't remember the content, you will still have a special feeling that is intermittent. Therefore, after trying hard to recall for a few minutes, Wang Cheng said with some uncertainty, I don't know the specifics. Anyway, I felt that I was very comfortable before seeing Teacher Fu. Fu Wenbo raised his brows and said, oh, are you trying to kill me? What, seeing me makes you feel uncomfortable? Feeling a bit of dissatisfaction from Fu Wenbo, Wang Cheng waved his hand quickly. No, it doesn't feel comfortable. How can I say it? Yes, it's like returning home. I feel very at ease and at ease. A few seconds later, watching Wang Cheng's description of how he felt when he was lying in the coffin, Chu Huan was fine. Just secretly jot down this feature. But Fu Wenbo and Xu Hongwen next to him fell into silence after hearing Wang Cheng's description. After watching Wang Cheng for a while, Xu Hongwen raised his head and said to Wenbo, why don't you send him to the hospital for a checkup? I think this kid may have some mental problems. But those who are mentally normal will not use the adjectives, steady, and safe, to describe the feeling of lying in the coffin. Wang Cheng, damn, I don't want to say that you have to ask again. If you ask this again, this is the response, obviously what I said is the real feeling. Wang Cheng felt very hurt by the eyes that Xu Hongwen and Fu Wenbo looked at mental illness. After his curiosity was satisfied, Fu Wenbo waved his hand. Okay, depending on your condition, you have suffered a little injury. You'd better go to the school's infirmary for treatment first. In addition, you'd better keep a secret about today's affairs. Wang Cheng sighed and said, is it okay to keep it secret? If it's spread out that I'm lying in the coffin and playing, I'm afraid everyone will think I'm too stressed and tired of living. Fu Wenbo smiled and said, it's good to know. After Wang Cheng left, in the training room, Chu Huan, Fu Wenbo, and Xu Hongwen began to look at each other. The atmosphere was inexplicably anxious. No, it got weird. After a while, Xu Hongwen was the first to break the silence and said, now because of Chu Huan, that Wang Cheng's illusion has been interrupted, what should I do next? Fu Wenbo said quietly, who's to blame? He seemed to be asking, but Fu Wenbo's eyes were on Xu Hongwen, his eyes were full of disgust and contempt. Being stared at by Fu Wenbo like this, Xu Hongwen suddenly felt that his head was a little big. Okay, I didn't know it before I said it, and I can't blame it all. Who would have known that there would be such a number one student in your 18th class this year? The key to the problem now is that this fantasy experiment failed. The students in class 18 should not endure what they should have endured, and their mentality will not be improved in the future. How to solve this? Fu Wenbo frowned and said, this is indeed a bit of a hassle. After all, after the first time, the second time, I'm afraid those students have already guessed it. After thinking about it for a long time, neither Fu Wenbo nor Xu Hongwen thought of a way to remedy the situation. After thinking hard to no avail, Fu Wenbo glanced at Chu Huan and asked casually, boy, is there anything you can do? Without thinking, Chu Huan shook his head and replied, no. But in the face of Chu Huan's decisive and quick response, Fu Wenbo raised his brows slightly. Hey, if you want to fool me, pretend you've thought about it. Chu Huan spread his hands and said, no, I'm just a student. Teacher Fu, you can't think of a way, what's the use of asking me? Fu Wenbo glanced at Chu Huan, then said, if you can think of a way, I can promise you one thing. However, as soon as these words fell, Chu Huan, who had been unable to do anything a second ago, immediately nodded in response. Make a deal. IFCK. Facing the seamless transition between Chu Huan's front and back, Fu Wenbo couldn't help but utter a foul language in his heart. The fists were subconsciously clenched. I really want to give Chu Huan a face full of peach blossoms. Chapter 28. Suppressing the urge to beat someone in his heart, Fu Wenbo said angrily, don't talk nonsense, hurry up. Hearing this, Chu Huan said with a, hey, smile, actually, this is all so simple. As Teacher Fu said, if the place for the illusion test is still placed in the school, the students in the class will definitely doubt it. But we can use a different approach. For example, Teacher Fu or Teacher Shu, when you go back, make an evaluation of the performance of the students in this class and then reprimand them. Then I euphemistically revealed a message to make everyone think that this fantasy trial is over, and won't there be a practical lesson to enter the secret realm of beasts later? At that time, when everyone has just entered the secret realm of the beast, let that senior Wang Cheng use his tool soul skills to create a new environment. Keep those students in the class who will be recruited. After the eloquent remarks, Fu Wenbo and Shu Hongwen were taken aback for a while. After a while, Shu Hongwen and Shu Hongwen, who had recovered, looked at each other. Fu Wenbo, what do you think? Shu Hongwen, looks like it's feasible. After getting a unified opinion, both of them grinned. Shu Hongwen turned his head a little stiffly to look at Fu Wenbo and said, old Fu, this kid, did you teach it? The routine is so deep. Hearing this, Fu Wenbo said angrily, what nonsense. If I taught it, do you think I would still get this plan from this kid? Can someone with integrity like me come up with such a destructive method? Shu Hongwen looked at Chu Huan strangely and said, a student who has just awakened in his third year of high school can come up with this kind of method. I suddenly understand why this kid's artifact soul skills are so evil. Co-authoring this guy, it's so insidious. Awakener soul, except for a part of luck. It's more related to the awakened. Or some hard-won memories, or experiences, characters, etc. There is a saying among the awakened people that they look at the soul of the device first. Then when he looked at Chu Huan, his eyes were wrong. For what Shu Hongwen said, Chu Huan frowned slightly, feeling offended. And when Fu Wenbo looked at Chu Huan, his line of sight was a bit complicated. Originally, it was just a random question from Fu Wenbo on a whim. How did he think that Chu Huan really had a solution? At this time, Fu Wenbo realized that he really didn't know anything about himself, a student who had been teaching for 2 years. In the past, I always thought that Chu Huan was just good-looking, and his grades in culture classes were okay. Others are no different from most students. But now it seems that Fu Wenbo sees more and more surprises from Chu Huan. Chu Huan didn't care about the strangeness in their eyes. Anyway, isn't it just to show others how handsome you are? Take a second look at yourself and you won't lose a piece of meat. However, after providing the two with their own method, Chu Huan smiled and said, Mr. Fu, I have already explained the method. Can you fulfill the request you promised before? Hearing this, Fu Wenbo pondered for a few seconds and then said, it can't be too much, otherwise it will be void. Chu Huan smiled and said, of course it's not too much. I just want a silver level beast crystal. I'm going, silver level. You dare to say it? Hearing Chu Huan's request, Fu Wenbo's eyes suddenly widened. Hearing this, Chu Huan smiled and said, Mr. Fu, you are an awakener of 3-star silver, and you must be using silver level beast crystals for your practice. Now give me one, this is not too much a request, right? Quote. Fu Wenbo said without a smile, oh, don't even think about it, my monthly salary is only 10 silver level beast crystals. Chu Huan smiled unabated, just looked at Fu Wenbo quietly like this. Although his heart hurts, Fu Wenbo could only respond because he had said something first. Even if 1 silver star is given to you now, the energy is too strong, but it is useless to you. In this way, I will give you a bronze 1 star tomorrow. This should also be the upper limit of the beast crystals you can use in your cultivation now. For the awakened, it is not that the higher the level of the beast crystal, the better the cultivation effect. On the contrary, the energy levels contained in different grades of beast crystals are also different. The higher the level of the beast crystal, the more pure the energy contained in it, and the more destructive it is. When the physique of the awakened person does not meet certain conditions, absorbing the energy in the high-level beast crystal will cause harm to the body. For someone like Chu Huan who has just awakened into a 1-star awakened apprentice, if he wants to practice through beast crystals, the upper limit of the beast crystals used is bronze. This is described in the textbooks of junior high school, and it can be said that it is already a common sense. Therefore, in the face of Fu Wenbo's remarks, Chu Huan is really hard to find reasons to refute. He nodded immediately and said, "All right. Anyway, this, bronze 1 star, beast crystal is completely unexpected. Something is better than nothing." After all these discussions, Fu Wenbo and Xu Hongwen also took Chu Huan to the classroom of Class 18. While walking, Chu Huan was also thinking about the previous things in his mind. The incident happened suddenly before, so when he entered the training classroom, Chu Huan didn't realize that he had fallen into an illusion for the first time. Looking back now, no attribute panel appeared on the head of that biting wolf. This alone is enough for Chu Huan to find the clue. But the problem is that Chu Huan did not speculate on the environment of the appearance of this biting wolf at the time. Thinking of this, Chu Huan couldn't help shaking his head and Wei Ran sighed. "I'm still too naive." Next to it, originally Fu Wenbo and Xu Hongwen started to discuss the rules for arranging the next class of 18 students to undergo the illusion trial on the suggestion that Chu Huan made earlier. But listening to the words that came out of Chu Huan's mouth, both of them had question marks on their faces. If it was before this incident, perhaps the two of them would not have felt anything about Chu Huan's words. But after the question was about the 18th class illusion trial, the two felt that although Chu Huan was still young, he had a strange talent in the black heart routine. Therefore, in the face of Chu Huan's words, Fu Wenbo and Xu Hongwen both wanted to ask Chu Huan at the moment. "I'm afraid this is not a misunderstanding of the word, simple." Chapter 29. When they returned to the classroom, the faces of the students in Class 18 were still a little pale. Not even talking to each other without a teacher like in the old days. Obviously, he has not recovered from the shock brought by the previous training classroom. After Chu Huan returned to the classroom, Xu Hongwen and Fu Wenbo also walked to the podium one after another. His eyes swept around the students in the classroom. Except for Chu Huan, the other students bowed their heads in a guilty conscience whenever they came into contact with Xu Hongwen. The entire classroom was suddenly filled with a solemn atmosphere. After 2 or 3 minutes like this, Xu Hongwen spoke slowly. "This time, a total of 23 students in Class 18 have awakened, but just now, in the illusion, facing a biting wolf who was only a low-level 1 star, you behaved like a child. There are even people who were scared to cry afterward. How could there be a bit like an awakener who had successfully awakened his artifact soul? It's a shame that he didn't even have the courage to resist when facing the fake biting wolf." Quote. After these words came out, a student below couldn't help but whisper, "How do we know that the piercing wolf was constructed from the illusion? Have we ever seen the piercing wolf in person?" Hearing this, Xu Hongwen sneered at the time. "Oh, even when faced with fake beasts, he was frightened and weak, but when faced with me, he dared to directly contradict. That's all you can do. Do you want me to apologize to you and say sorry for making you frightened by the beast? Or do you say that you will commit suicide by raising a bar and opening your mouth when facing a beast in the future?" In the end, it was a student. In Xu Hongwen's cynicism, the student's face flushed red, and there was a bit of shame on his face. At this time, Fu Wenbo on the side suddenly stepped forward and took over the right to speak. "Remember, as an awakened, you are destined to go to the secret realm of beasts frequently in the future and face beasts every day. When you enter the secret realm of the beast and meet the beast, only one of you and the beast can survive. If you don't even have the courage to face the beast, I advise you to apply to the school as soon as possible and change to the ordinary class, so as not to waste everyone's time. If I were you, I would take today's events as a valuable lesson, and practice hard in the future, so that when I encounter a beast in the future, I can only sit on the ground and wait for help from others like today." After Fu Wenbo and Xu Hongwen sang together and made all the students in class 18 feel embarrassed, they had the idea of being brave again, and it was Fu Wenbo and Xu Hongwen who walked out of the classroom on the bell. After the two people's remarks, the students in the classroom obviously improved their mood. Just looking at the students in class 18 who gradually showed smiles on their faces, Chu Huan couldn't help shaking his head. I just want to say to these students, it's too early for you to be happy. After the school's awakening ceremony, due to the division of classes and the arrangement of classes, the students will only attend the morning cultural class before the new class schedule is released in the past 3 days. In the afternoon, let the students go home and try to get acquainted with the soul power in their bodies as soon as possible and practice the basic soul power method. After the morning class was over, Chu Huan went to the supermarket to buy a few kitchen knives after simply eating something. After all, if there is no weapon, it is indeed a bit constrained to deal with those piercing wolves like hedgehogs. Yesterday, I forced myself for a day, and today Chu Huan would go in with his bare hands to find trouble with those biting wolves. An hour later, after passing through the entrance of the secret passage, Chu Huan had already re-entered the secret realm of this biting wolf and beast as the familiar weightlessness reverberated. Perhaps it was because he thought that he would be able to obtain system points through hunting. When entering the secret realm of this beast, Chu Huan turned out to be a little excited. After randomly choosing a direction, Chu Huan, who took out a kitchen knife from his school bag, quickly moved in this mysterious realm of beasts. After searching for about a minute or so, and looking around, Chu Huan's eyes quickly locked on under a dead tree 30 meters away. Chu Huan's eyes flashed as he looked at the piercing wolf resting under the dead tree. Looking around, Chu Huan pinned the kitchen knife to his lower back after confirming that there were no other extra bone-piercing wolves nearby. In the surging soul power, the whole body of the Suona Tool Soul has appeared in front of Chu Huan. However, as the Suona Tool Soul was suspended in front of Chu Huan did not directly inject soul power into this Suona Tool Soul like yesterday. Instead, he raised his hand and grabbed the Suona in front of him. I hope that playing by myself can have new effects. After whispering softly, Chu Huan slowly put the Suona to his mouth. The next second, as the loud music spread out with Chu Huan as the center, the soul power in Chu Huan's body flowed towards the Suona that Chu Huan was holding at the moment like a collapsed dam. The speed was so fast that even Chu Huan, who was already mentally prepared, looked condensed. At the same time, the piercing wolf that was resting in the distance immediately opened his green eyes when he heard the music, turned over and stood up to face Chu Huan. But just at the moment when the biting wolf just saw Chu Huan, black musical notes turned into streamers and burst out from the tool soul in Chu Huan's hand. However, unlike the previous time when Chu Huan played the march for carrying the coffin, through the soul of the tool, the black notes that sprang from the soul of the tool would condense and form the 5 coffin-lifting phantoms and the coffin after they landed. This time, as these black notes were still in the air, they began to quickly merge together. When these notes were more than 1 meter above the ground, the 5 shadows carrying the coffin and the coffin had already appeared in Chu Huan's line of sight and stepped on a familiar rhythm. Is it really possible? Previously, when Chu Huan performed the march for carrying the coffin by himself, it took about 18 seconds from the beginning of the performance to the condensing of these coffin-carrying phantoms. And now, with Chu Huan playing by himself, in just 3 seconds, these coffin-lifting phantoms have successfully appeared. Between the two, the time was shortened by a full 6 times. In other words, through his own playing now, Chu Huan can be sure that when he plays the coffin-carrying march with his Suona, he can shorten the time it takes for this soul skill to activate and take effect. Chapter 30. However, before Chu Huan was surprised for too long, the soul power in Chu Huan's body was exhausted when the piercing wolf in the distance successfully jumped into the coffin that Chu Huan summoned through the soul skill song. Without the maintenance of soul power, the Suona in Chu Huan's hand suddenly turned into a fluorescent light and returned to Chu Huan's heart chamber along Chu Huan's hand. At the same time, the coffin-carrying phantoms that were surrounding the biting wolf in the distance were also drifting away in the wind like ashes. Keep the biting wolf who is still keeping its stomach up at the moment, waiting to die peacefully. 16 seconds. Seeing the phantom of carrying the coffin disappear, Chu Huan, who counted the duration of his own playing at the moment, not only was not dissatisfied at all, he was always smiling. With the improvement of Chu Huan's strength and cultivation, soul power will always improve. But the release time of the tool soul can be shortened, which is even better news for Chu Huan. Having successfully obtained an answer that satisfies him, Chu Huan is in a better mood now. Glancing at the biting wolf that was still lying on the ground in the distance, Chu Huan slowly pulled out the kitchen knife he had just pinned to his lower back. While approaching the piercing wolf, he sharpened his knife. A minute later, cut a wound on the bone wolf's body with the kitchen knife in his hand, and then put on the prepared gloves to take out the beast crystal from the bone wolf's body. During the whole process, Chu Huan was more careful, trying to keep the biting wolf's body as complete as possible. The matching energy is detected. Is it absorbed and converted into system points? After closing the pop-up system prompt, Chu Huan held the beast crystal and quickly started the basic soul power technique. The next moment, a small amount of energy flowed into Chu Huan's body from this beast crystal. The energy in the beast crystal, in addition to enabling the awakened person to assist in cultivation, also has the ability to sustain life. Through the energy in the beast crystal, the awakened person can also replenish the soul power consumed in his body. If it weren't for this, Chu Huan wouldn't have been able to keep a necromancer as a thug by his side yesterday. A few minutes later, with the replenishment of beast crystal energy, Chu Huan's body was once again flooded with sufficient soul power. And compared to before, Chu Huan's soul power has managed to rise a little. Since yesterday, Chu Huan has been an interesting consumption of soul power. Every time he waited until his soul power was exhausted, he would recultivate with the beast crystal for a few minutes to replenish his soul power. This effect is also obvious. Through the continuous consumption of soul power yesterday and now, and then replenished through beast crystals, Chu Huan's current limit of soul power has reached 260 points. In this state, Chu Huan's upper limit of soul power can reach 400 points in 2 or 3 days at most, and he will be promoted to become a 2-star awakened apprentice. With the end of the soul power replenishment, wait until the Suona device soul is remanifested and start playing. When the loud and unique timbre reverberated, the coffin-carrying phantom was once again summoned by Chu Huan's tune. A few minutes later, he looked at the new necromancer who stood up and shook his head, and patted the necromancer next to him. Chu Huan was the start of today's hunt. The sun was setting, and the sky was a little yellowish. Slowly walked out of the dimensional channel, and it was clean when compared. At this moment, Chu Huan's whole person is full of a sense of being in the dust. Sitting on the bus back to the city, Chu Huan's thoughts moved, and his attribute panel was instantly mobilized. Host: Chu Huan, HP, 280/280th. Level: 1-star awakened apprentice, soul power required for upgrade, 307/400ths. Tool soul: Arhu, Suona. Physical constitution: 2.8 basic standard is 1. Strength: 3.2 basic standard is 1. Agility: 10 basic standard is 1. Mental strength: 2.32 basic standard is 1. Tool soul skill: Suona tool soul, coffin carrying march level 1, system points required to upgrade, 0.01000ths. Auxiliary skill: basic soul power method. Current system points: 314 inches. Putting his eyes on his system panel, watching the success of his all-day efforts, Chu Huan's mouth lightly revealed a bright smile. Compared to yesterday's impromptu intention, Chu Huan, who was prepared earlier today, stayed in this biting wolf dimension space for a full 4 hours. And with the addition of a few kitchen knives bought from the supermarket as weapons, the efficiency is greatly improved. As the number of battles increased, Chu Huan's mentality and skills between battles were also subtly improved. If it took nearly a minute or so to solve the battle against a piercing wolf at the beginning, now, for Chu Huan, it only takes less than 10 seconds to solve a piercing wolf. But for Chu Huan, the current biting wolf brings too little benefit. From the very beginning, this bone wolf and fierce beast secret realm was where Chu Huan used to test his weapon soul skills and practice them. Now, after 2 days of fighting, Chu Huan's mentality has successfully changed. At least it won't be as serious as the fear of beasts that it started yesterday. This result also made Chu Huan more calm when facing beasts, and made the most correct choice as soon as possible during the battle. This change of attitude is not unimportant. Murder first, practice courage. For the awakened who have just awakened, the improvement of strength is important, but how to train the courage is even more important. If you don't have enough courage, your aura will be weaker by 3 points when facing fierce beasts, and your strength will not be fully exerted. This is also one of the main reasons why Fu Wenbo and Xu Hongwen in the school want to let the students in Class 18 come to a fantasy test. Now that the goal has been achieved, it is naturally impossible for Chu Huan to continue to waste time in the secret realm of the biting wolf and beast. It's almost time to consider switching to a more advanced beast as a target. It was also while Chu Huan was thinking to himself, Chu Huan's phone suddenly vibrated. Looking at a series of unfamiliar numbers on his phone, Chu Huan hung up the phone without thinking. But a few seconds later, the phone, which had just been quiet, rang again. Glancing at the caller ID number above, Chu Huan frowned and connected the call. Almost as soon as Chu Huan put the phone to his ear, a vaguely familiar voice came from the receiver of the phone. "Hello, Junior. I'm Wang Chang." Hearing this, Chu Huan said with a light heart, "Senior Wang Chang. Is there something wrong?" Wang Chang, who was on the other side of the phone, said solemnly, "I want to ask my junior for help with something. I don't know if I have time. I invite my junior to have dinner for an interview. Take me out to eat." Hearing Wang Chang's words, Chu Huan touched his belly with a twinkle in his eyes, and his tone softened, "Okay." The gentle voice came into his ears, and Wang Chang, who was on the opposite side of the phone, had a somewhat bad premonition for some unknown reason. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.